Book Summary. So Late in the Day. Stories of Women and Men by Claire Keegan. Claire Keegan So Late in the Day gathers 3 of her short stories. 1 new, 1 mid-career, and 1 from her earliest published work, into a compact yet resonant volume that examines how the relationships between women and men can be shaped, corroded, or destroyed by subtle imbalances of power, gendered expectations, and the lingering shadow of violence that bringing these 3 pieces together. Keegan not only invites readers to follow the individual arcs of the stories but also to see how they speak to one another across time. The settings vary, from rural and urban Ireland to a German seaside town, yet the questions persist. How does resentment manifest in ordinary encounters? How is desire distorted when one person's empathy fails? And why does a lack of generosity, emotional, moral, or material, become such a fatal flaw in intimacy? Story 1. So Late in the Day. The opening and most recent work in the collection is the title story, So Late in the Day. It's a deceptively quiet, psychological study of a man named Cathal, set over the course of an unremarkable Friday in Dublin. The story unfolds in a close third-person point of view, filtering the day's events entirely through Cathal's interior thoughts. Plot summary. Cathal has just finished work for the week and looks forward to a long bank holiday weekend. But instead of any sense of anticipation or warmth, his mind turns repeatedly to Sab, a woman he once dated and nearly married. Their engagement, however, came undone, though in Cathal's version of events, it was she who overreacted to certain disagreements and incidents. The narrative gradually reveals the subtle, insidious patterns that poison their relationship. Sab had her own career, interests, and expectations, yet Cathal consistently framed her choices as unreasonable or excessive. He felt put upon when she wanted to celebrate events, to spend money on gifts or travel, or to have him share in domestic labor. What emerges is not any single explosive conflict, but a drip feed of withheld generosity, emotional stinginess that left her feeling unseen and undervalued. Keegan lets these revelations surface obliquely. Cathal recalls, for instance, how he refused to take time off for a family wedding she wanted to attend, or how he begrudged buying her a small treat. What to him seemed prudent or logical reads to the reader as joyless and mean-spirited. The present-day action is minimal. Cathal walks home, contemplates ordering takeaway, considers watching television. Yet this ordinariness is precisely the point. His life has returned to a flat routine, and he is vaguely aware that something valuable slipped away. His reflections are tinged not with remorse, but with irritation and a faint self-pity. In this way, So Late in the Day becomes a portrait of a man whose failure was not in a single grand betrayal but in a sustained, almost unconscious withholding. Themes and analysis. The story dissects how emotional parsimony, a refusal to share joy, time, or affection, can erode intimacy as surely as overt cruelty. Cathal never hits Sab, never cheats, never shouts, but he refuses to participate fully in their shared life, and this absence leaves a scar. Keegan's choice to keep the narrative in Cathal's point of view is crucial. Readers experience his justifications directly, catching the flickers of entitlement and gendered expectation he doesn't consciously acknowledge. Sabba's voice is absent, which reinforces the imbalance. Her story is filtered through his limited perspective, mirroring how women's experiences are often mediated through male narratives. Story 2. The Long and Painful Death. Originally published mid-career, The Long and Painful Death is more overtly confrontational. Here, the protagonist is a woman, a writer, who has been granted a 2-week residency at the seaside home of Nobel Prize-winning author Heinrich Böll in Germany. The setting is serene, the opportunity prestigious, and the time meant to be hers alone to write. Plot summary. Upon arrival, the protagonist relishes the quiet and the feeling of being temporarily removed from domestic obligations. But this retreat is abruptly disrupted by her professor, an academic who appears without invitation, claiming a connection to Böll and assuming he has the right to linger. What follows is a slow but suffocating intrusion. Her professor offers unsolicited literary criticism, questions her credentials, and delivers patronizing lectures. He takes up space, literally in the room she occupies and figuratively, in the mental space she needs to work. His assumption of entitlement is never couched in overt hostility. Instead, it's couched in the politeness of authority, which makes it harder to challenge without seeming rude or hysterical. Over the course of his visit, the protagonist's sense of sanctuary crumbles. She begins to feel she must guard her solitude aggressively, yet she also fears the social repercussions of doing so. Her professor leaves only when he is ready, not when she asks him to. His departure is a relief, but the damage has been done. The writing time is fractured, and the illusion of safety in creative space has been punctured. Themes and analysis. This story exposes the gendered dynamics of intellectual space, how women's creative work is often disrupted or diminished by men who see themselves as natural arbiters of artistic merit. Her professor's intrusiveness is both physical and ideological. He imposes his presence and his opinions without regard for the writer's boundaries. Keegan's handling of tension is masterful. The absence of overt violence makes the intrusion more insidious, highlighting the microaggressions that women often face in male-dominated artistic environments. It's not just the theft of time but the presumption that her time is available to be taken. Story 3, Antarctica. First published in Keegan's debut collection, Antarctica is the most overtly dangerous of the three, pushing the tension between men and women into explicitly violent territory. Plot summary: a married woman from rural Ireland decides to take a short trip away from home during the Christmas season. Her motivation is partly curiosity. She wants to see what it would be like to have a sexual encounter with someone other than her husband. She travels to a nearby city, books a hotel room, dresses with care, and goes to a bar. There she meets a man who is charming, attentive, and at first exactly what she imagined. They drink together, flirt, and eventually leave for what she believes will be a consensual sexual experience. However, once alone, the dynamic shifts abruptly. The man becomes controlling, physically dominant, and frightening. What began as an adventurous flirtation turns into a situation where she feels trapped and powerless. The man's possessiveness and disregard for her comfort reveal a violent streak, and the encounter becomes one she must endure rather than enjoy. She escapes physically unharmed but emotionally shaken, the experience forcing her to confront the naivete of her initial fantasy and the very real dangers women face when desire intersects with male entitlement. Themes and analysis. Antarctica examines the proximity of desire to danger, how quickly a consensual encounter can tip into coercion when one party sees the other as an object to control rather than a partner to respect. It's also about disillusionment. The protagonist's brief rebellion against marital monotony ends not in liberation but in a stark reminder of the risks inherent in trusting strangers. The title itself, Antarctica, evokes coldness, isolation, and a foreign, inhospitable landscape, reflecting both the literal winter setting and the emotional aftermath. Interconnection and arc across the three stories. Though each story stands alone, their placement in this volume creates a cumulative effect. Read sequentially, they trace an escalating arc of male intrusion and harm, emotional stinginess so late in the day, the smallest, most invisible form of corrosion yet one that can kill intimacy, intellectual intrusion, the long and painful death, an undermining of autonomy and creative freedom, physical threat, Antarctica, the danger of outright violence. This progression mirrors a truth about gender dynamics. The behaviors that begin as subtle disregard or entitlement can, in other contexts or over time, manifest as more overt forms of harm. Keegan's prose throughout is spare, precise, and unsentimental, allowing small details, a tone of voice, a remembered gesture, to carry the weight of entire histories. She resists moralizing, letting the reader experience the discomfort of ambiguity, particularly in So Late in the Day, where Cathal remains largely unaware of the harm he caused. Overall significance. So late in the day, Stories of Women and Men is not a comforting read, but it is an illuminating one. By assembling these three stories from different points in her career, Keegan invites reflection on how her thematic concerns have persisted and evolved. At their core, the stories suggest that the problems between women and men are rarely about a single incident. They are systemic, arising from patterns of expectation, entitlement, and imbalance. Whether those patterns manifest as quiet meanness, as in Cathal's case, as intellectual trespass, as with her professor, or as outright physical dominance, as in Antarctica, the through line is the erosion of respect and generosity.